Hey there, Kenneth French of Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. We're very, very happy you stopped by. Either you're going to watch this or listen to this because you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably an entrepreneur who's either just starting out or you've been around for quite a while and you want to take your business to the next level. You're probably a real estate investor, maybe even a real estate agent, maybe a professional or of some sort, professional advisor of some sort. And well, you are stopping by because you need some valuable advice from one of the top industry leaders there is. Anyway, thank you very much. Once again, Kenneth French, Vast Voice, telling business secrets to entrepreneurs. Really glad you stopped by.
You're going to see exactly how it works to work with a client. This is going to be a case study where we're going to help Deb, who's brand new in this little thing that she's going to be doing, and she's working with a client. We're working together. It's going to be fun. Hey there, Kenneth French from vastsolutionsgroup.com. Also hanging out with Deb from vastsolutionsgroup.com. Normally she does our bookkeeping. She's in charge of our bookkeeping. She's in charge of everything. Anyway, she's new into a certain service we're going to be providing, and I'm going to add some value, and she's going to add some value. And we're going to talk through helping this client. What's up, Deb?
Hey, Kenneth, thank you. Thank you. So I have a client. They are 2 years away from retirement.
Okay.
And they're a little nervous right now with the way the economy is going. And they want to know what's the best thing to do with their 401k right now. They are investing moderately.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not sure if they should roll out the 401k into maybe something that's less risky for their retirement because they're so close to it.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Obviously, I don't know. I don't know who your client is, so we're going to talk in general. Especially, obviously, we have client confidentiality. We don't want to mention their names, and this is for informational purposes only. But okay, so right now, and I think you might have mentioned they're potentially going to be even leaving their current employment. Therefore, they have a 401k. They would want to roll over to, let's say, an IRA as an example, or another 401k. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay.
They're not in a hurry to do anything like an IRA as far as paying the taxes on the retirement. They'd like to delay that.
Yeah, I understand. And by the way, so when they have a 401k, let's say he or she, it's a he, but let's say he works at ABC, let's say ABC Airline as an example, right? And he's in the 401k, he leaves employment, which it sounds like he's going to.
Yes.
If he rolls it, meaning the assets, when I say it, the assets into let's say an IRA, it's tax neutral. He wouldn't pay taxes at that point. Same thing if he rolls the assets from his ABC 401k to another 401k. That's a tax neutral event. So luckily in that case, he doesn't have to worry about anything as far as taxes go. But very importantly, what you just said was very important. He is, 2 years from retirement, he should be a little bit more conservatively invested, because if all of a sudden he's invested in, I'm making this up, in crypto or something that's very, aggressive, and then all of a sudden his, let's say, $300,000 goes down to $200,000 and he retires, he's going to be living on the $200,000 and obviously the portfolio being high and then going down, that's not good. Versus if he has it in a little bit more conservative type of assets, it might last him longer because he wouldn't be able to need to withstand the market downturn. So he should be thinking, number one, more conservatively now than he probably would have 10 or 20 years ago. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. So in regards to rolling the funds, if they decide to roll the funds into an IRA, is that a form of an investment, or is it more like a cash?
Really good question. So right now he is, again, this is for illustrative purposes. I don't know where he's invested now, but let's say he is invested aggressively, especially now because, he's changing jobs. He probably should be thinking about moving him to conservative investments, number one, right off the bat, because it takes a while to roll money over, let's say, into an IRA. And then what he should think about is rolling it to an IRA. And the IRA is, let me define what an IRA is. The government back in the old days wanted retirees or people, the populace, to have a way of putting money away for retirement and not having to wait for Social Security money, because who knows what's happening with Social Security. So it's just basically a banner. It's individual retirement arrangement. It's a banner of a congressional act that stated people who put money away into an IRA or even to a 401k, by the way, get tax deductions. So they're incentivized by the government to be able to lower taxes. Number one. Number two, every year that money is in a, let's say, a traditional IRA or a traditional 401k, they're not taxed. When they pull money out of the IRA, that's when they're taxed. When they're down, if they abide by all the rules down the road. Now, it's not an investment per se, but it's kind of a banner that, individual retirement arrangement. So meaning usually what you do is you put money from, let's say, the IRA into, as an example, mutual funds, or you can even do real estate now. So meaning it's not an investment, but it's a banner or a wrapper, a tax deferred strategy. So people aren't hit with taxes, but under it, that's when you're doing the investments into, again, mutual funds, real estate, et cetera, et cetera. So you can also, though, have money set aside in an IRA into money market or something that's really, really conservative. It could be any of the above. Does that make sense? So IRA, yeah, it's an investment, but then not really, because it's a banner, it's a moniker that under the moniker of an IRA individual retirement arrangement or even 401k, you could put money into money market, very conservative. You could even put money into cash or put money into real estate, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
you have all those options under the IRA.
Right.
Conservative investing, cash, or investments like real estate.
Right. That's exactly right. And by the way, what I would say for your client that you're talking about, so let's say he's in his 50s, 60s, he should have a lot of the portfolio, depending on the circumstances, more conservative assets, but hopefully he's going to live for a long time. In the long-term assets, let's say for 10 years down the road, so a portion of the portfolio, he can be a little bit more aggressively invested because he's that's called laddering a portfolio. You have some for short-term, some for the middle term, and some for more aggressive down the road. So it's kind of a third in general when looking at a portfolio for someone who's retiring in just 2 years, as an example.
Okay. So would he have the option of right now, because of the insecurities that he's feeling about the economy, he's already seen some of his money kind of go down over the last month or two.
Yep.
So say he decided to go conservative across the board. Could he, in a year, if things look different and he felt more confident, can he come back and then maybe bring it back up to moderate?
Totally. The answer to that is yes. Now, I'm going to take a way big step back. So I'm going to talk about kind of investment philosophies in general. So I'm going to delve into a little bit more about what I'm saying about being conservative if you have a short term. Now, the shorter term someone has for as a time horizon for needing their investments, they should be more conservatively invested. The longer term, more aggressively invested. Again, because someone who's aggressively invested, let's say they have a long time horizon of 20 years, it's no big deal if it goes down and up over time. Hopefully it'll go up, right? But if you have a short term, you can't withstand those corrections in the market or whatever the case is.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
Now, going into what you're saying, but let's just say for whatever the sentiment in the market or his thoughts are, hey, the market's going to go up. Yeah. In an IRA or whatever the investments are, generally, he can decide what to do with the assets with his, let's say, financial advisor as an example. And he could, let's say 6 months down the road, he's like, dude, hey, I think this market's going to go up. Instead of, I'm making this up, instead of maybe having 20% into small company stocks, which are a little bit more aggressive, maybe he wants to go 25% into more aggressive investments. So typically it's up to, the investor, in this case, your client, and, or let's say his financial or her financial advisor, to make the determination where the assets go. But always, in my opinion, always remember that the shorter time horizon you have, the more conservatively invested, the longer time horizon you have, the more aggressively invested you would be.
Okay. Absolutely. Got it.
You understand?
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And then what I would also say is, so let's just say and this is for most of our clients here at vastsolutionsgroup.com, usually what they do is they have their own company. Let's say they have an LLC as an example. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll start, a 401k or profit sharing plan or, some other retirement plan, and they'll roll the money over from their old company, in this case, ABC company, to whatever company they start as far as an LLC goes, and then starting a 401k. And it's a tax neutral event. So it's pretty cool because you could start your own widget company start a 401k. Then you could roll the assets from, in this case, ABC to your client's, own 401k, and then they're in control of the assets. Because the kind of cool thing is when you're a business owner, the government thinks that you're pretty smart. You can handle things. So you don't need to defer to someone else. So you're what's called the trustee of the 401k assets, even if you have no employees. So you can determine really what happens to the assets much more so than otherwise. The flip side of that, in an IRA, the bad component is the government says, in an IRA, you still need some help. You need a trustee. So you have to defer to another being, that being another entity, or as an example, another investment institution, let's just say a bank. So they in an IRA are really in control of the assets. As long as you're abiding by the rules of the IRS and abiding by the trustees' rules, then you can invest in whatever they see fit. They, though, are taking care of the assets on your behalf, in this case, on your client's behalf. So that's the difference between an IRA and a 401k or a profit sharing plan of a company. There's a trustee or someone who leads the assets, in charge of the assets for the employees, even if you have no employees. So you as a business owner, your client as a business owner has control of the assets. But in an IRA, you give up and relinquish some of the control because your assets have to be conferred by a trustee. Just to throw that out. Most of our clients have their own entities and also start their own 401ks or profit sharing plans, and thereby are trustees.
Okay. Is that the same as a self-directed as well?
That's just a marketing term, but yeah. So, by the way, you could have a self-directed IRA where you're investing in real estate, where you're not bound by the kind of a broker dealer, which is a traditional financial planner. Same time, in a 401k, let's just say where you're your own trustee, it's a self-directed, but because you have the trustee, a business owner, they can determine where the assets go. So they just construe it as self-directed because you don't have to defer to, let's say, a mutual fund company as an example.
Okay.
Self-directed is just marketing slang, if you will.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah, for him. So for him, in his case, if he has whatever $300,000 and he only has 2 years as a time horizon, what he should do is go talk to a financial advisor. As an example, by the way, we do financial advising at fastsolutionsgroup.com. We have a broker dealer relationship. We also help people with self-directed assets. He should make sure the most important thing. There's this paper done. This is going to bore some people. Stick with me here, people. It's very important. This paper done by a group, Brinson B. Bauer Hood, University of Chicago. It was kind of a landmark paper where it showed the importance of asset allocation. And what is asset allocation? It's determining where your assets go into what types of buckets: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, aggressive, middle aggressive, conservative. The most important component is the distribution or the allocation itself of the investments. Again, if someone has a long time horizon, they could be more invested aggressively. And if they have a short term, conservative. That's the most important thing because, let's say in 2008, when the market really, really went down badly, let's say someone was invested in massively aggressive assets and then they had a $300,000 portfolio. And then because the market went down precipitously, it went down to 100,000. Those people went down, now are living on $100,000, just like I mentioned at the outset. Well, you probably don't want that. So on the flip side of that, let's say someone were invested conservatively at 300,000, the market went down. Well, the nice thing is theoretically they can buy assets because they still have a bunch of cash. They could buy a bunch of investments because the market went down. So they're buying low, right? Selling high. That's the ultimate element of investments. So that's a huge deal. But at the same time, you don't want to be in that camp where you lose all your money. So that shows that Brinson B. Bauer Hood paper, University of Chicago, all professors at the University of Chicago. No, that's not true. One of them was professor at Yale. But what I would say is it makes a huge difference in people's retirements if they're thinking about the asset allocation. That's the most important part, generally speaking. It's 88 to 92% of an investment portfolio where you put the distribution of the assets. And as long as you're doing it in line with the overall philosophy of, thinking about the conservative and risky element of the investments and your time horizon, you should be good to go. That's the biggest thing for him to think about, would be the asset allocation in his time horizon.
Okay.
Are we vibing with that?
Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense. What if he's 2 years away from retirement,
Mm-hmm.
and the client feels comfortable or they feel confident with the economy, um, and would you consider advising being more aggressive, or even if the economy was on top and doing great, just sticking with being conservative because he's 2 years away?
Yeah. So the answer to that is have him come up, just like the United States has a constitution, most businesses have business plans. Have him come up with a plan, kind of a plan for the assets. And then every so often, really every year, come back and look at that plan and base his decisions currently, whenever, down the road at 3 years, let's say, base it on what the situation was when he put together the plan. Sure, he could go in and change the plan amendment as let's say for the Constitution, but base everything based on the overall plan that was initiated in this example now, because you could do some changes, but you got to remember that, as an example, his asset allocation, which we talked about, the older he gets, the more conservative he should be with the assets. So I'm going to give a little bit more in depth of an answer here. So let's say they have these things called lifestyle funds. That's the best way to explain the following. So there's a lifestyle fund. So basically, mutual funds are put together with a bunch of mutual investments. Let's say someone has 5 years towards retirement. The mutual fund, the mix of mutual funds by the mutual fund manager, will be relatively conservatively invested. Okay. And they'll also have another fund. So let's say right now we're in 2025. Let's say that fund is conservatively invested and it will readjust itself as time gets closer. So meaning as we get to 2026, 2027, 28, 29, 30, it gets more conservatively invested. It changes the allocation for the investor.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Using that, my approximation of the older you are, the more closer towards retirement, the more conservative your investments should be. So these lifestyle investments get more and more conservatively invested as we get closer to the end date of the fund. In this case, 2030. Okay. Likewise, you'll have a fund, let's say it is the 2035 fund. That will get more conservatively invested over time, and it adjusts for the client automatically. Does that make sense? Likewise, you'll have you'll have a 2050 fund, believe it or not, which is weird to think about. Right now, it's invested relatively aggressively. It'll get more and more conservatively invested over time as the mutual fund manager, the person who runs the fund, realizes that we're getting closer to 2050, so they make the portfolio more and more conservatively invested. So that's basically helping the client, in this case your client, because the assets are managed for them and it gets more conservatively invested over time. So the client has to do less work because the mutual fund manager is doing the work for the client. So that goes back to the example of, the kind of the constitution, if you will, the broad plan of the assets. As long as you have a plan in place, you can change the plan over time, but at the same time you want to make sure that overall you're sticking to your plan. You've got to stick to a plan overall.
Okay. Revisit the plan.
Totally.
Make sure it's in line with the changes throughout the years. Okay.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay.
What other question? I can tell you have other questions. Come on, young Deb. Have any other questions?
Wow. I mean, you already gave a lot to think about and a lot to discuss with my client. I can't think of anything else right now.
That was that easy. So for you as a bookkeeper, I know it's kind of esoteric to think about the investments because you're doing his books, but the most important thing really to do is I would say, one, communicate with the client. So he in this case knows kind of the overall not the overall plan, kind of knows what he's getting into, because every investor should really understand kind of the overall plan. Without a plan, you have nothing. Like, here's an example. I live in Washington State and I'm going to Florida. Can you imagine if I didn't have a roadmap or didn't have a GPS? I might end up in Texas, right? Well, Same thing with investments. Same thing when you're planning for assets, planning for retirement. You have to have a plan. You have to have a specific plan how to get there. Yeah. So maybe when I'm driving to Florida, I might decide to go to Chicago. Well, that's cool. Just like you've asked a couple of times. Yeah, I could change my plan, but I know ultimately I want to go down to Florida. So I have to make sure that, I readjust my plan, but I hit the ultimate goal of, in this case, Florida. I mean, and what's scary is you don't, as an investor, you don't want to do the wrong thing because you only have one time that you invest. If you really think about it, you don't probably want to go working at Walmart. Not to say there's anything bad about that, but at the same time, you only have one crack at retirement. So you might as well, spend some time. He might as well spend some time making sure that his assets are taken care of, that he has a good plan, because without a good plan, you might end up in Texas versus, ultimately in Florida.
Okay. Makes sense. That makes sense.
Any other questions? You're good to go?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is great. This gives a lot of stuff for me to give them to make a decision with.
Sweet. All right. Once again, this is Deb Woodruff, vastsolutionsgroup.com, and me, Kenneth French of vastsolutionsgroup.com. This was a case study, where we're helping, a client who's looking for some asset allocation help or retirement income help. And that's what we do here at vastsolutionsgroup.com. If you have any questions, go ahead, stop by our website. You'll be happy you did.
Bye.